This is a study looking at the impact of Siponimod in patients who have secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, and several measures of cognition were looked at. The one measure that turned out to be significant was an impact on something called the symbol digit modality test. This is a test of processing speed, and the results were actually very encouraging. The longer that patients were treated with Siponimod, the better they did in terms of processing speed, and there was actually some improvement in processing speed. So this suggests that treatment with Siponimod in secondary progressive MS could have an impact on one of the key problems with cognitive function in patients living with MS. The other trial is called the ASSESS study, and this was a post-marketing study with a specific intention to determine whether the dose of Fingolimod at 0.5 milligrams was the lowest possible dose to use. The FDA had required a lower dose study being done, and a 0.25 milligram dose was also used in this study. And a third arm, which was an important control arm, was glatiramer acetate or Copaxone. So it was a three-arm head-to-head clinical trial. So patients were randomized to one of the two doses of Fingolimod versus Copaxone. And the main result of this study was showing that the 0.5 milligram dose of Fingolimod was the right dose, as it turns out. The 0.25 milligram dose also has an effect in multiple sclerosis, but it's not quite as robust as the effect as the 0.5 milligram dose. And the other interesting thing about this study is that in terms of relapses and MRI measures of disease activity, we now have the first trial which shows superiority versus Copaxone, versus glatiramer acetate. And we can see that the 0.5 milligram dose of Fingolimod is actually better than the standard dose of glatiramer acetate. Of course, Mayzent, Siponimod, just had its launch, which I'm very excited about. The FDA provided clarification in terms of what they really mean by relapsing forms of multiple sclerosis. And the indication is for patients with clinically isolated syndrome. That's the first attack, through relapsing MS, and on into secondary progressive MS for patients who still had recent relapses. And by recent relapses, that means in the 2 years prior to considering putting a patient on Siponimod. So this is exciting. We haven't had any medication available yet for treatment in secondary progressive patients other than mitoxantrone, which has some issues with respect to serious cardiac toxicity and development of a hard-to-treat leukemia. And so to have a drug which is generally safe and well tolerated and proven now to be effective in secondary progressive MS provides us an extremely useful tool in our MS armamentarium. You know, Fingolimod has I think, come to toward the end of its development cycle, or its life cycle. Interestingly, the generic Fingolimod that we were expecting to see become available this year looks like it's still several years off, and so there is some more shelf life for branded Gilenya for several more years based on patent protection around the 0.5 milligram dose. That's interesting. I think that when we do see a true low-cost generic treatment become available for multiple sclerosis that is highly effective, it will result in some changes in the MS landscape for sure.